Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a non-traditional legal program with your host and trusted advisor, Liz Myska, your guide through the web of life's dilemmas.
Welcome to another edition of Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Liz Myska. And today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing my audience to Brooke Cooper, maiden name Kader, from the Worcester Red Sox. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for pushing me out of my comfort zone to do this.
Well, Brooke, you and I have known each other probably 2 weeks, which is typical for me. But you impress me as somebody who is very sensitive and very thoughtful, and it's a real pleasure to have you here to talk about how you came to be, meaning how you came to Worcester, and how you became the vice president of marketing with the Woo Sox. So I'm wiggling with anticipation because, again, I only know a small amount about you. So take us back to how you came to this position with the Woo Sox, what your life aspirations were, and how, as usual, with everyone, they divert.
Absolutely. So I always say I never really anticipated having a career in baseball. I grew up in Rhode Island, so I grew up going to Paw Sox games. But I, thought that I would end up in the nonprofit world. I come from a family of educators. My mom is an elementary school principal. My brother is a high school teacher. My sister works at a middle school. But I don't think I have the temperament to be a teacher or be in education, and I applaud those who do because I think they are so wonderful and they make such a difference. So I really thought that I would be in the nonprofit world. When I was going to Providence College to get my master's in business administration, I needed a business internship. And so I applied with the Pawtucket Red Sox and got an internship in the merchandise department. And it just so happened after my first season that my supervisor left the organization, and I was just in the right place at the right time. I knew the operation, and I remember sitting down with Dan Ray, our general manager, and him asking me, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years? And I told him, I said, Dan, I don't know if I will be in baseball in 5 or 10 years, but I know that I really enjoy being part of the organization, and I would love to continue on, in a full-time capacity. And here I am 6 years later, still with the team. Wow. But that's really how I got my start with the team.
I'm thinking there's probably a little bit of bittersweet coming to Worcester, particularly with your roots in Rhode Island and your master's at Providence College, and that whole association of the Paw Sox with Rhode Island. And again, I'm sure in merchandising, and if you can just describe a little bit more about merchandising, that's the stuff, right? That's
the so while you go to the game and you get the experience in merchandise, exactly, we are selling you the stuff. So the hats, the T-shirts, the foam fingers, all of those really fun things that you get to take home with you to remind you of the wonderful experience that you had.
And the tchotchkes, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. So
you get to look for the tchotchkes.
Yes. And it's fun, and you get to kind of use your creativity. And when I did run our merchandise department, so many people would ask me, well, you must have a background in fashion. And I'd say, absolutely not. I am not a fashionable person. But I think like anything in our organization and in our industry, it's a matter of kind of having your ear to the ground and listening to what fans want. And I was good at doing that. And so that's really, what that was about. But it was bittersweet, with the move. I think the way that I describe it is on a personal level, it was more bitter because I am a native Rhode Islander. I still live in Rhode Island with my family. Grew up going to Paw Sox games. And there were so many wonderful people that I got to meet and get to know in my time at McCoy Stadium. On a professional level, it's once in a lifetime for most people that you get to be a part of, building a new ballpark and being part of opening that new ballpark. And Worcester as a whole has been so supportive and welcoming that it's really just been such an amazing experience. And the different things that we've gotten to experience and kind of building the organization from the ideal, now that we're kind of starting over in a way, it's once in a lifetime, and so I'm very fortunate for that. I say once in a lifetime. That's unless you're Larry Lucchino and Janet Marie Smith, who have built multiple ballparks and renovated Fenway Park. But I imagine that for someone like me who didn't anticipate a career in baseball, that this will probably be a once in a lifetime.
Well, I think you're very accurate with that, with that thought process, because ironically, one of the negotiators here in Worcester, who was instrumental in having the team come, another lawyer, I bought my condominium August 1st of, I think it was 2018, and he had said to me, "Shh, the Woo Sox are, they're and it hadn't been announced. It hadn't been announced yet, and he had told me, great things will come from this. In other words, the lives will be impacted, and again, great things mean different things for different people. So there had been so much speculation about whether the team was going to move or not move, and I know the legislators in Rhode Island were, they were trying to keep the team, and I understand that. Change is difficult for anyone.
Well, and if I can just say, we fought really hard to stay in Rhode Island also, which is important. So it was, like I said, it was a bit of sadness for us as well. But, that behind us, just very excited about, and I think that, Worcester has certainly, lived up to everything. We are just so excited to be part of, the Worcester community. And there's such a sense of pride in Worcester and those who live here and are from here. And as someone, I'm very proud of where I came from, Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Everyone in my organization knows that, if we have a group from Woonsocket or we're honoring someone from Woonsocket, make sure Brooke knows about it, because I really carry that flag for my city. And I feel that in waves here in Worcester, that people are so proud of Worcester and the progress that has been made here. And we're very happy to be a small part of that.
Well, and I was born here in Worcester. I didn't grow up. I grew up in one of the suburbs, but Worcester has always had this stepchild, always, looking up to Boston. It's like, oh, we want to be that, and it's like, be what you are. Don't waste your time, pining to be something that you're not. And maybe that's a good, pining because of baseball, But that's why I think there's this, almost like there's this wonder that the team has come here and we have built a stadium. And again, having been to the stadium and having some site, quote unquote, it's beautiful, meaning just the notion of having something big time in Worcester, because again, Worcester's always, ducking its head, saying, "Oh, I'm not worthy." So this is, from my perspective, something that is really homegrown. And again, commendations to the whole organization. You're feeding into that. In other words, not in a negative way, but you're really sensitive to that. Just in the accoutrements at the park, having the train, come through, having a mini version of the green monster and the blue monster in right field. All of those things are so important, because baseball is nostalgia as well. Yes. So I just want to go back to your comment about, not being a fashionista or anything like that, but obviously you have an eye for, what would be appealing, or like, how do you keep your finger on the pulse? Because I'm sure people are always trying to like, oh, next season it's going to be it's going to be a life preserver that people are going to wear on their heads. So buy now.
Yeah.
I mean,
so I will say that I actually so I started off in merchandise, and I transitioned into the role that I'm in now, vice president of marketing. And so we hired a full-time merchandise director. Her name's Katarina Burns, and she is far and wide much better than I was in merchandise. And so I actually don't, she's the one who's really putting all of those plans together and doing all of that. And it's great because she's just really doing well and succeeding. And so, I feel proud to, because I brought her in, and when she gets the recognition that she deserves, I think that it's so important to, recognize where maybe you're not the best at something, and surround yourself with people who are. Amen. And so I will say that, like I said, that was the best thing that I could have done for merchandise. And so all of that great gear that you see around Worcester is actually her product, and I cannot take credit for it.
Okay, all right. So I guess I'm just trying to determine the distinction. So merchandising is different from marketing in the sense of merchandising is the stuff. So marketing is what the
marketing is there's a lot that falls under marketing, and really marketing is anything from the ballpark entertainment in game to the television to the telecast. Merchandise and our branding is under that, as well as community relations and outreach, and and really there's so many elements. Advertising is often people think marketing and they just think advertising, but there's really so much that goes into it, and the biggest piece is listening to our fans. And that's where we had, on July 10th, we had an open house, a free open house where we welcomed people to the ballpark, because we're kind of riding a high right now, but it's so important to be proactive in getting better, because at some point the honeymoon phase is going to be over, and
it's not going to be a new facility anymore. It's going to be worn.
Absolutely. And so it's important, and it was really great to have an open house, because we got many people attend who actually hadn't come to a game yet, even though we were halfway through our season at that point. But they wanted to see the ballpark without the big crowd, without the baseball, and kind of get a feel for, okay, is this somewhere where I want to come? And we got suggestions from our fans, and then we sat down afterwards and went through all of those suggestions. I want to say we received 302 suggestions. It might be 305.
You're not the numbers person. Yeah, it's okay.
But we received those and started kind of going through
sifting
them and
through.
whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually that was the first day that I heard your name officially. And if I can say, you're a pretty intimidating person yourself. I hear attorney, and
you start quaking.
Yes, and then who would have known that you're so welcoming and kind, and not to give attorneys a bad rep, because we have Kim Miner in our organization, who's our in-house counsel, and she's wonderful. But I know she is on top of our stuff, and you mentioned to me how much you like to research, and it was just funny because that that clicked with me, because that's exactly how Kim is. If we're talking about something, she'll be like, well, let me do some research and let me find out more. But that was the first day that I heard your name, and I think there were a lot of great things that came from that day, and just listening to our fans.
Well, it's not ironic, because I am very strategic too. So when I had heard that there was going to be an open house, people, and I know I'm generalizing, but they want a tire kick, and they don't want to be told. Mm-hmm. They want to experience it for themselves. So I thought this is a great opportunity for people to come in, even though I personally and many of my peeps had already been to Polar Park, but again, I don't want to jam things down people's throat. And as a lawyer, you have to listen to people saying why they do something or why they don't do something, because there's always an excuse as well as an explanation. So strategically, we gathered, including Joanne Clark, who you gave a tour to, outside the park before we entered. And we decided, this is a tour. This is not a training. We're not here to espouse our own, our own creed. And later, I didn't even have a chance to regather everyone. Everyone went off in their little separate groups. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until after I realized, this person, met Larry Lucchino with this person and did this. Yeah. And it was just really, really interesting. And the day after, because it was on a Saturday, July 10th was on a Saturday, I communicated with Joanne and again, just said casually, who were you with? And then she mentioned your name. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, bingo, eureka. you hit the mother lode, Joanne. Because Joanne is a nurse, and mm-hmm. she's involved with AARP as a volunteer. And again, she and I are rubbing elbows with various initiatives as well. So again, my philosophy is the more people in the circle, the bigger the ring, the more exposure we all have to one another, and the different strands of, what's important to me may not be relevant or important to somebody else. But in crafting community, you have to be receptive to all of these different voices and different requirements or needs or wants.
Yeah. And Joanne was wonderful, I'll say, and she was also very funny, because in one breath she was telling me as I'm giving her the tour that we thought of everything. And then in the next breath, she was saying, "Oh, but actually, this doesn't have this." And so I was kind of poking fun at her about that. And she kept saying to me, "I'm so sorry, for telling you all these things that are wrong, or all these things you need to improve." I said, "Joanne, this is why we're doing this. This is the purpose of this day, is to get this feedback." Right. I said, "If you just tell us how wonderful we are, how are we going to improve?"
Exactly. Right. And I think that often is why people are reluctant to even go, because they're like, well, I'm just a little peon here. What can I contribute?
Well, that's how I was about coming on this show.
And you can see that we've debunked that myth. Okay. But again, it's people skills. And when you were talking about, different skills for merchandising or different skills for marketing, we all don't possess the same skills. And that's why we need to collaborate. We need to work with one another to learn, and again, have that aha moment. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that you also participated in a training that we did where you were blindfolded. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but you were blindfolded outside the park as opposed to inside, because you thought you were going to, that's what the experience was going to be. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I thought that we were going to be inside the park and doing the tour blindfolded. And after I was blindfolded, I learned that we were actually going to walk through Kelly Square. So I was a little terrified. And then you hear the traffic and whatnot, and it sounds so close. Mm-hmm. But I will say, the things that I just didn't realize, what are those things called?
Oh, truncated domes.
The truncated domes. I apologize. The truncated domes. I did not know the purpose of those, no. And I felt so silly for not knowing that. And now I notice them everywhere that I go, right. And how important they were, and how useful, and how they made me feel safe, at that time. But then the second time that we did the tour, we were inside the ballpark, and I thought that I was going to feel much safer and more comfortable being inside the ballpark. And it was during a game, so there were, lots of fans there. And it was completely the opposite. I felt more uneasy inside the ballpark because we're kind of in a smaller area, and I was bumping into more things, and there were more people around, and it was interesting, I think, to realize how many people just kind of knock into you and don't care. And so it was very experiential. And now it gets me thinking, what can we do? How can we make the experience, getting into Polar Park and then also inside Polar Park, appealing to those who might be visually impaired. So yeah, it was very
Impactful.
Impactful, yes. And I should also say that Dr. Charles Steinberg, our team president, also joined us
Yes.
inside the ballpark, and he actually sat during the game for quite a while.
For quite a while.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, and Dr. Charles was, he's a baseball whiz, but there was a participant who was blind, who was using his smartphone to communicate, and Dr. Charles evidently was even though Dr. Charles was blindfolded, was saying, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that? And again, it's learning. It's learning a different way. It's not a right way or wrong way. It's just a different way. And that's why I am grateful that, again, about the receptivity of of the organization to suggestions, to a different way of doing things.
Thank you. I think we're grateful for your patience with us.
Well, again, blind people, we tend to we're much slower. We're much slower, and we're very polite. and again, I'm generalizing here, but we oftentimes don't speak up. And by virtue of having these excursions to the park, whether we are attending a game or doing a training or having a tour, has been very empowering for not only my sighted volunteers but also my VIPs, my visually impaired people, because oftentimes they're not given credence. They're just told, like it or lump it, and so don't go. And then again, we all being people, we're like, yeah, this is going to be it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to be inconveniencing people. And you know what? It's just easier not to go. And then it's a loss. Absolutely. That's the loss on both sides of the equation. A loss for the business, a loss for the education that you talked about so eloquently about your family. I mean, really, we're always lifelong. We should be learning and educating ourselves and realizing, I don't know what I don't know.
and I think the more that I learn, the more I realize how much
I don't know. Right.
Yes.
Trust me, it's a lifelong.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong condition. But that's why it's been a thrill just to walk down there in the wintertime. Well, actually, beginning last October, during COVID, when we were outdoors, my walking group started walking through Kelly Square, because I wanted to get people acclimated to this is the area where the ballpark is going to be. And actually, last October, Mayor Petty was blindfolded and walked through Kelly Square, and it was on a Saturday. And I had said to him, I'm not trying to be the standard bearer for blind people, but I want you to think about, would you come down here if you were blind? Because if you can't cross the street and there's no sighted guide, why would you come down here? And so that I had started my little trailblazing back then. And then all wintertime, when the stadium was under construction, yes, Virginia, we were walking. We were walking in the cold, because again, it was during COVID. We were walking to the park because I wanted, as close as we could get, I wanted my VIPs, my visually impaired people, to know where it was. I didn't want them, or the sighted individuals who guide us and give us rides, to say, I don't go down there. That's not a section that I'm familiar with. So again, I was trying to lay the groundwork for familiarity, and so when we came for the tour, that was the first time for many of my VIPs, even though they hadn't been there before, they were familiar with it, in the sense that there were they had been in the vicinity, and because they had sighted assistants, both staff and people they were familiar with. It was a win-win. So kudos to the team for being open and receptive. We're on this journey together. And the other thing I'm going to say before I let you close is, you think of the crosswalks when you can see them, but think of it, when I look at a crosswalk now, it's a ladder. It's a ladder.
Yeah.
Even though it's flat to the ground,
Yes.
it's not. It's a ladder. So we're on the first rung of the ladder, and again, the only place to go is up, unless we
absolutely.
crash to the ground. So.
And Liz, in my short time knowing you, what I've heard you say multiple times is, we all being people, and I think that you just have that about you, and that's really, what has drawn me to you and to being here today and stepping out of my comfort zone, is you really just have that way about you. I think of bringing people out and together, and I mean, you keep saying how people. They might have an explanation, but it's also an excuse, and I just think that's so that's really touched and impacted me, and so I really very much appreciate that, and only knowing you for a couple of weeks, but that very much sticks with me, and you can tell that you live by that. So I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and welcome to the club. If anyone has a question about the WU Sox, what do you recommend on how they can contact? Who can they contact? How can they contact?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I can give our general, info at woosox.com, but you could also go online, and it would be easy to find. My email is bcooper@woosox.com, which is easy to do. But yeah, in general, if you reach out to anyone in the organization, we are a small team, and so if it's not the right person, then they'll quickly pass it along to who the right person may be. We try to be really responsive to everyone, and really, trying to get ourselves out there in the community and building these relationships, because, Worcester, might be a city with, so many people, but it is pretty tight-knit is what
Right.
we're finding. And we really just want to contribute and be a part of that. And the city, on the up, we're very excited. So if anybody wants to, reach out or has any questions, we still have, a good bulk of our season left, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the experience for all of our fans. So yeah, we're really excited.
Thank you, Brooke, for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Tune in for the next episode of Connecting the Dots.
Please note that the information provided in this show is not a substitute for consulting with an experienced local attorney and receiving counsel based on the facts and circumstances of a particular transaction. To contact Lizbeth, email her at Lizbeth@elizabethlmyska.com or call her office at 508-753-7681. We're online at connectingthedots.lawyer. Executive producers, Lizbeth Myska and Jack Peacock. Producers, John Medberry and Bill Hamilton. A production of Elizabeth L. Myska, JD, LLM, in association with Compliments.